basics for troubleshooting and problem identification. This is your bread and butter as an IT professional, and it shows your value and worth. Your ability to resolve problems consistently and efficiently builds your reputation as an expert. Your field is no different from any other. Take automobile mechanics for an example. You've probably heard someone in need of car repair ask you, "Do you have anyone you can recommend?" And you want to be that person in the IT field, someone who can professionally resolve the issue with great customer service. You don't want to be the shop where people say, "No, don't take your computer there." So troubleshooting involves developing a hypothesis of what you think is wrong, and then developing an evaluation to test if what you think is wrong is actually true. And in a moment, I have a diagram to discuss the process that you'll use. And as you grow in your career, you may have a collection of documents yourself that you use for the not so frequent problems. So when they occur again, you already know what to do. And this might be things like how to open a particular clip on a computer, or how you cooled a particular system, or what your customer's preferences were. So here are the steps. The key thing you need to know when you're looking at how the system is supposed to work, you need to know what commonly goes wrong. I myself, when I get a computer in the shop, I type in the make and the model with the keywords, kind of what I think is going wrong, and I put that in the manufacturer's website or in an internet search. And then I look for common words like chip issues or optimal size memory for XYZ computer and the best type of connections and so on. I always search for best practices, so why be average? Use the word best in all of your searches and be the best CompTIA A+ certified professional in all of your work. Be the best in the field. So what I want to start with here in items 1 through 7 is I want to talk about the theory and the process behind troubleshooting steps. Within this course, you'll have an entire chapter later on troubleshooting internal components and computers, so I want to talk about how to troubleshoot common operating systems as well. In problem solving, you want to begin by generating hypotheses, ideas, or thoughts on what might possibly be wrong. These are based on the signs and symptoms which you can see in your work through what you think may be the cause until you have resolution. Right here are the common 7 steps that I used in troubleshooting and problem identification. So step 1, I identify the problem. Under the identification of the problem, you want to gather information from the user that will help you determine the scope of the problem. You want to ask them open-ended questions, and it shouldn't really feel like a police interrogation to them, but you need to get as much useful information you can to help you pinpoint what the problem might be. Quite often they'll say something simple like, "It's broken, I don't know." So you have to do a little bit of detective work here and ask them questions that'll lead you down the right path towards the problem identification. You got to draw information out of them. Ask them to identify any changes they may have noticed while they were using the computer. So step 2 is establishing a probable cause. After listening to what they tell you, you will probably have some inkling of what the cause was. For example, if they say they smelled a burning smell prior to the computer turning off, you may want to begin by inspecting the power supply or any cords. If that turns out okay, you'll want to inspect the exterior casing of the computer for damage, and so on. So step 3 is testing to determine the cause. You may need to do several tests on what the user tells you. For example, if they say the laptop will not turn on, you may need to inspect the battery, the power supply, the functionality of the on-off switch, and any other type of damage to the computer. For step 4, you want to establish a plan to resolve the problem. So a problem may be very difficult or very simple, but you need to know in your mind, these are the steps I'm going to use to resolve it. For example, if a user spilled a drink on a keyboard tray, you may need to determine if you can dry the keyboard tray out using a towel or compressed air or simply time. What you need to do is you may have to disassemble it and then test it. So basically, you have a plan for what you're going to do from taking it apart and putting it all the way back together and testing it. Step 5 is implementing your solution. The implementation of a solution may be something like drying the keyboard with a paper towel, then using compressed air, then allowing the keyboard to dry for an additional 4 to 5 hours, and then ultimately plugging it in and testing it. Step 6 is verifying the functionality and implementing countermeasures. It's important in this scenario, what you want to do is verify the functionality of the computer once it's dry, and that means you want to plug in the computer and ensure it'll type all the letters and characters, and it's working satisfactorily for the customer. Sometimes when computers or their keyboards become wet, the keys become sticky, you need to remove them and clean all of the additional keys based on the functionality. After you've tested the functionality, you want to implement any protective measures. And this is preventive types ideas, any type of education that you can give a customer, or any additional preventive methods that you can provide so this doesn't occur again. So in this particular case, you might look at a keyboard skin or a keyboard cover that prevents any kind of spills on the computer in the future. And this is the most important step. Step 7 is documenting your results. Documenting your results is important because you want to maintain a record of the repairs you have done, and you want to have good documentation for the client on what type of work was performed, so all of the steps that have been performed in the repair, such as disassembly, cleaning, and reassembly, are documented. Shown here is a simple diagram of the steps we just went through. You want to go from left to right in the diagram and identify the problem, establish any possible causes. Then you want to test the possible causes, and then you establish a plan to resolve what you have found. You then implement your plan and fix or resolve the issues in your plan one by one. And when you've completed all the steps in your plan, you verify the component is actually fixed. So if it's not fixed, you want to move to the untried solutions. So looking at this chart here where you see the word not fixed, you go back and you try any untried solutions. So this is a cyclical process until you're able to identify the problem. So you may have a list of untried solutions you simply work down until you find resolution. And then in some cases, you may have to go back to the drawing board where the word no is, and you have to identify and brainstorm for some more possible ideas and causes. Ultimately, when you resolve the problem, you want to document the results. And this goes in two places. The first being any documentation you give to the customer as the work you performed and what the issue was. And the second place you want to document is anywhere you keep your own personal notes for future use. And I usually keep this in some type of a digital file or a Word document so I can keyword search it later on. And this makes things go a lot faster down the road. For example, I might have had some issues trying to take apart a Toshiba laptop and simply opening the case and some issues like that. So I would jot down some notes, in other words, using Toshiba case opening, and then put a few notes on what I did to specifically get it open. That way, if it's 4 or 5 months before I see another Toshiba, I've already got my solution documented. So here are a few tips to use in problem analysis and cause identification. You want to determine the scope of the problems. This is accomplished by questioning the customer. They will identify many issues that exist. For example, based on their discussion about the behavior of the computer, they might say it's slow. You may determine many steps need to occur, such as cleaning the cache memory, or performing software upgrades, or performing any kind of hardware upgrades, or a potential memory upgrade. So there can be many causes, so your scope may range from one issue to many depending on the issue. You want to identify changes to the computer. So when you're questioning the customer, ask them if they've installed any new hardware or software, or changed the location. These new location changes might lead you to the path of identifying what could have occurred or what could have caused the issue. And I've had this occur a couple of times in the hospital setting where I had an issue once with a customer that had a Wi-Fi issue, and they were actually attempting to utilize a laptop in a radiology area, which contains significant lead shielding, so it'd be almost impossible, at least at a minimum, very difficult to achieve any type of a quality signal in the area. So definitely question the areas that people have had their computers in or what happened last when they were using it. Then you want to break your problems into smaller pieces. Remember, when you're questioning the customer, try to break each problem into a small component. Get all of the clues while you have the customer there. There may be a number of smaller components or smaller problems which cause their issues, such as a virus or a fragmented hard drive. You want to prioritize the problems in the order they should be tested. This is simply the order you resolve the issues. If a customer identified software issues and you identify a corrupt hard drive, then obviously you're going to need to work on the corrupt hard drive first and get the operating system working well before you focus on the software issues. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, so always look for the obvious. Look for the simple things like a frayed power cord, a crack in a casing on a computer, signs of excessive heat, or the blue screen of death, or other simple boot problems. Remember to back up any settings or files when you begin so that you have the original configuration in some type of a text file or a digital capture. Always make sure you do this. Then you want to test one configuration at a time. That way you know if what you tried to fix actually fixed the problem, if it did or did not. That way you can return to the previous settings if it didn't actually cause any change. And remember, sometimes the symptoms on a computer can be caused by another device that's actually connected to it. This might be a printer or a camera or a mouse or a keyboard. So keep this in mind as you triage your problems. Test all of the related items to make sure they're functional and compatible. Documentation resources are very important to the A-plus professional. With so many manufacturers and so many information technology devices, with so many hard drives and so many chips and so many connections, in the ever-changing information technology landscape, it's difficult for you to know everything about every device, every piece of software, and every piece of hardware. So you don't have to know it all, but you need to know where to turn. I generally begin with the manufacturer's website on their technical pages. Many manuals are available from manufacturers and vendors online through their websites. Sometimes they give you key codes to access websites to special areas. There are many IT knowledge databases that are available too, and just general knowledge bases such as Apple support communities and Microsoft communities, or websites like Linux.com. If you have new equipment or any added equipment, your customers may have vendor training documentation or any kind of documentation from service on the equipment. Be sure to ask them if they've had any recent services or any services occurred. That way you can obtain documentation on any new changes. And you yourself may attend vendor training on a routine basis as an IT professional and have a number of documentation resources from them. And last but not least, there are a number of internet resources. There are many technical forums such as Computer Hope and computer forums where you can ask other techies for advice and find existing common solutions. Over time, you will develop your own go-to sources. Here are a few more tips you can use for communication and professionalism. Remember, these are two attributes that are separate from your technical skills, from your ability to work well with customers. And how you interact with customers can affect your ability to be an average IT professional or to be the best in your field. So you always want to begin by listening closely to the customer and don't interrupt. It's a common courtesy. With your interaction, they're giving you clues to the issue which may help you resolve their problem. You want to make sure that you speak clearly and slowly with everyone. They're trying to grasp concepts that are technical in nature that may not be familiar to them, so give them time to think and acknowledge what they understand and what they may have questions for. You want to seek clarity to help you with clues to issues. You want to minimize technical jargon with customers such as ports, chips, or connections. Keep it simple because they won't understand many of the common computer components and softwares that you're explaining. You want to be sure to minimize the use of acronyms as well. That just makes things a little bit more confusing if you're not technical in nature. You want to use open-ended questions like, describe what you saw last when the issue occurred. You'll get a lot more details that way. Finally, avoiding our arguments and don't minimize their issues. To you, an issue might not be a big deal, but to them, it's prohibiting them from accomplishing something. Another aspect of your professionalism is how you dress. Dress for success. Always dress professionally no matter what your location. Whether you're going to the customer or they're coming to your shop, dress in clean and well-kept attire. If your company wears identification or name badges, always wear it when working with the customers. People like it when they know who they're working with or who they're speaking to. You want to make sure that you're always on time. If you're going out into the workplace to a customer's location, or if you're working in your shop, be in the shop when you say you'll be in the shop, and when you set an appointment at another location, be there on time or early. You want to always exhibit a positive attitude. Positivity goes a long way, especially if a customer is already frustrated at their wits' end with a piece of technology. Then you want to exude confidence. Project your confidence as an A+ certified professional. Be confident in what you say. You don't always have to have an immediate answer to every question. You can reply back with something like, let me look at some additional ideas, or let me research some additional options. Remember, you're in the driver's seat now, because if they knew what the issue was, they wouldn't be calling you in as the expert. You want to be confidential and private. Customers expect confidentiality and privacy, whether it's with their own information on their computer or specifics in data files. So use discretion and business savvy. You may disagree with a screensaver or a sticker on a laptop or items on their desk which display personal preferences, but respect their rights and remain professional. There are many ways you can show respect to customers. You want to be culturally sensitive. It may be difficult to understand speech, especially when customers are trying to describe something technical in nature. And remember, be sensitive to those with disabilities. You may also encounter some technical generational gaps. Some people grasp technical information better than others. Some customers will even surprise you with their level of knowledge. And then finally, show the customer self-respect. Never argue with them or be defensive about any issues or subjects about their computer equipment.